Hello, and welcome to Producing Equity, shining a spotlight on diversity in Hollywood. My name is Capri Maddox, the Executive Director and General Manager of the LA Civil Rights Department. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are talking about LA's most famous industry, film and television, and how we can bring more diverse talent on set and on screen. From PAs to studio executives, Hollywood has long struggled to bring more women and workers of color into its ranks. According to a McKinsey study, non-white studio executives make up only 14% of TV executives and only 8% of film executives. This is important because films that do not have a producer of color are less likely to have workers of color on the set. This racial inequity costs the entertainment industry roughly $10 billion a year. TV and film is one of LA's biggest industries, employing over 600,000 people. So, today, we are pulling back the curtain on the entertainment industry and putting equity in the spotlight. We have an esteemed panel joining me for this conversation today. Sumi Parekh is the Executive Director for Group Effort Initiative, which works to create a pipeline for members of underrepresented communities into entertainment careers. Russel Johnson is a filmmaker and a mentor who has worked with the NAACP Hollywood chapter and the Directors Guild of America on diversity issues. And finally, we have Chip Warren, who is a writer and a director, as well as the co-founder of Manifest Works, a nonprofit that connects those impacted by foster care, homelessness, and incarceration with career opportunities. Welcome to all of our panelists. Sumi, let's start with you. Hollywood has been an LA industry for over 100 years, but it's never really looked like LA. Can you tell us the state of diversity in Hollywood and some of the barriers to increasing diversity on our sets?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to keep this answer short and sweet, but I think we could all talk hours about the state of the diversity. But I would say ever since the Oscars So White and the Me Too movements back in, I think, 2015, I do think one of the big successes of Hollywood is that they finally have come to realize that we have a diversity issue in Hollywood, in the entertainment industry, that needs to be addressed and needs to be fixed. And so I would say since 2015, I think a lot of companies have internally kind of assessed what they need to change, what needs to be addressed, how they need to strengthen and build out a more diverse pipeline. So within these companies and studios and agencies, et cetera, D&I committees have been set up, departments have been created, initiatives and programming have been created to strengthen and diversify hiring, the pipeline, education, and helping to get people from underrepresented communities into the company. And I think for the most part, they've done a great job trying to figure out that, hey, we have a problem and we need to fix it. And I think internally and individually as companies, they've incrementally made changes that they need to make in order to diversify their own sets, offices, et cetera. I would also say from a government perspective, too, I think government is starting to step in a bigger way and address diversity in a way that we haven't seen before. And because we're in LA and in California, I think the California Film Tax Credit is a great example. It used to just be a tax credit to incentivize productions to stay in LA and to stay in California. But now, Governor Newsom with the current one, where there's still some debate, it hasn't passed yet, there has been a diversity incentive added. That is going to encourage and require companies or productions that are eligible to actually create a diversity work plan. And if they don't fulfill that requirement, they get a 4% penalty. There is debate still happening in the state legislature. It hasn't passed yet, but this is the renewal that will extend out the tax credit for another 5 years after it sunsets, I believe, in 2025. And then lastly, I think the union, IATSE, which represents about 100,000 plus workers across the United States and represents below the line crew. And I think for the first time, we've seen IATSE take diversity more seriously. And for those of you sitting on this panel, IATSE is mainly a bunch of old white men. I mean, that's straight up who they are. But now that those men are getting older and looking to retire, membership is becoming an issue. And they understand that they need to diversify their membership. So as part of the 2021, I think it was the 2021 West Coast IATSE agreement, what they had with the studios, they've actually carved out diversity incentives within that agreement. And because of that, these local chapters in LA have started to accept diversity. So creating their own D&I committees, apprenticeship programs, curriculum to train people and teach them how to get into the union, how to work on sets, et cetera. And they've even carved out a working internship program within that agreement that will actually allow underrepresented folks to come serve as interns, learn about how to be a PA, how to be on set, and then eventually work towards their hours towards joining the roster. So I think a lot has been done. But obviously, we are here today because not enough has been done. So I think we still have a lot to talk about. I think the change has been incremental since 2050, but it hasn't been large enough to be sustainable and substantial and really address that diversity gap. So I feel with a more collective and collaborative approach, we can do a lot more. And then to answer the second part of your question, barriers to set. As you guys know, GEI, we place a lot of folks on various productions across the country. LA is our largest market. I think 3 to 4 barriers come to mind. The first one for us is transportation in LA specifically. As you know, a PA, a big job is to run errands. And in order to do that, you need a driver's license. Sometimes you even need your own car, even though gas is covered. And a lot of the folks that I work with in GEI, they're low income. They can't afford to have a car. They've never gotten their driver's license. So I think that's not really an issue for productions necessarily to be like, we're no longer going to require a car because errands have to be run. But GEI needs to work alongside productions to figure out how do we, fulfill that, help with that barrier. Is it that we pay for our participants to get driver's license? Is it that we encourage productions to find other jobs for them, et cetera? So that's a big barrier for us. I would say from a disability perspective, a lot of our folks come onto set with certain disabilities. It always takes extra work for those people to feel like they're being accommodated. So I think just, for me personally, working with all of these productions, it'd be great if addressing a disability was just part of the protocol. And then finally, I would say no matter how much all of our organizations try, it's still about who you know. And I think that will always be a barrier with the entertainment industry. So GEI, we've had about 185 PA placements on set since we started in 2020, but we've also had a lot of people get turned down because at the end of the day, they make it all the way through the process, and then they get told, oh, and the production supervisor's friend's niece got hired instead. So it's still about who you know. So I think that's a big barrier that we're still trying to work through and figure out.
Right. Thank you for that, and I'm so glad that you are now on the inside making this happen. You were in government helping us for a little while, and I'm glad that you're able to walk the talk on the inside. And speaking of people's names being the same, when you think about the connection of who you know, when I watch the credits for any movie or any production, you'd be surprised at how many people happen to have the same last name that work on any given production. So thank you for that answer, and thank you for continuing your work. I'm going to have the next question go to Martin. As a filmmaker yourself, you faced many challenges to trying to get into the industry, right? And before helping DGA with diversity goals, tell us about your journey in entertainment and why diversity has been such a challenge for Hollywood.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things for me is I knew from the 3rd grade that I wanted to work in the entertainment industry. And it's funny, you talk about having, and it's who you know, right? I knew no one coming from San Diego. So I had to come to Los Angeles not knowing anyone. I went to film school and really just tried to push through. I think I've applied to every studio for a job at least 2 to 3 times in my last 10 to 12 years of being here. And I don't think I can honestly say I don't think I've received one callback from a studio. So it's definitely who you know. And like, you apply to a job, suddenly there's 200 people that apply to that same job within 10 minutes. So it's really kind of hard being a filmmaker in Los Angeles if you don't know somebody. I want to go back to my life and trying to forge a life for myself in the entertainment industry. Like I said, I knew I wanted to work in the entertainment industry from the 3rd grade, but not knowing anyone. And I remember being in the library trying to search for, like, I wanted to write, but I didn't know what I should search for. And it wasn't until film school I realized that, oh, you should be searching for a screenwriting. A screenwriting job is what you're looking for. And so not necessarily knowing what the approach should be, that I feel like kind of stifled me in a sense. So I finally got to Los Angeles and I was working with the Directors Guild of America. I got hired as a part-time theater manager because of my film festival experience of managing film festivals in San Diego. And it was great because I had the opportunity to really start to get to know the industry, start to know the big players, start to understand what some of the biggest barriers were. And then I got promoted twice, and the second promotion was working with the diversity department. And one of my first jobs was to collect all of the data from all the television shows that were aired that year, because we wanted to figure out how many television directors were women or a person of color. And it wasn't until I think 2012 where I really understood that there was an issue and there was a problem, because, you know, before that I was a bright-eyed kid trying to break into the industry. I didn't understand that there were barriers until you're smack dead in the middle of the industry. So you talk about 2015 being really the time where diversity started to kind of pick up. In 2012, I remember trying to send emails out to the studio heads, and diversity felt like a homework assignment that no one wanted to really tackle. So I definitely seen how diversity in the past few years have really been something that that's gotten legs, and like companies are really starting to have that conversation, and it wasn't always that way before. So it's really cool to see the change. And now, as a person that I'm, you know, a commercial producer, and the last thing I want to do is see someone like myself like not have that opportunity. So it's really cool to be now in that seat of hiring people and giving people that opportunity to realize their dreams, and essentially give underserved communities the opportunity to realize their true potential.
Wow, that's amazing. And as I listen to you talk, I can't help but think of Willis Edwards, who was, he's no longer with us, but Willis Edwards was the head of the NAACP Hollywood chapter for a while. He was an advocate in so many spaces to talk about the inequities in Hollywood for years and years and years. And so to see, you know, 2015 come, and even more of a push after 2020, and hear the great work that you're doing really lifts the day. So thank you so much for your service and for your push. And now I have a question that I'd like to actually pose to Chip. Sorry, Chip, I want to turn to you. There are many people in Los Angeles that are coming out of foster care or incarceration or homelessness. They need good paying jobs as well. What kind of barriers do they face as it relates to employment, and how can studios help to meet those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing they probably face is stigma, inherent bias people have when they go out looking for talent, not knowing where or how to look for talent that isn't your nephew, things like that. And so, but this population represents one of the most robust talent pools that the industry has at their disposal. And I think a part of it is just the awareness of knowing to go out and look for it, and look for one of the many organizations that are working with this population and these communities to ready them for careers in Hollywood. You know, to distinguish yourself as a PA on set, and one of the great things about Hollywood is it's a highly upwardly mobile industry. So you talk to executives, directors, DPs, 9 out of 10 of them started as PAs. And so everybody understands that trajectory. And so this population, by and large, has this incredible inherent sense of hustle. They're survivors. They are really good at reading the room and understanding politics and understanding. So you just basically need to give them the lingo and the rules of the game and set them loose. And it obviously is a little bit more complex than that. But that's why we find the people coming out of Manifest Works, 100% of them that choose to stay in the industry, which is most, are working within 6 months. And our alum are known as some of the hardest working PAs in Hollywood. So when it started as, oh, we have a must hire over here, and that's like the thing we do for social good. And it's like, next thing you know, those are the PAs you look to who are working circles around all the people that might have got that job from nepotism. So, you know, I think it's just a matter of being very conscious of your inherent bias. If you sit down and you're talking to 4 or 5 people that you're going to hire, and let's be frank, if someone comes in and from your lived experience, it sounds like, oh, that person kind of talks like they grew up in the hood. Well, maybe they did, and they're going to work circles around your nephew. It's okay. Not everyone has to talk exactly like you. Not everyone has to have the same lived experience as you. Look for the people who you think have that fire and who that job might make a tangible difference in their life, their family's life, and in their community. And if we do more of that, the industry is going to change. It's about these long-term, having a long-term view and making these present-term choices that are going to plant the seeds for, you know, this talent pool that's going to grow and going to emerge into the levels where they're the ones doing the hiring in a few years.
Right. I love it, and I know that your clients could teach survival skills to cats, and so these are the people that are going to, you know, continue to, you know, fight. Not only they're fighting, they're not fighting for a paycheck. They're fighting their way out of poverty, and so they're going to have the hustle. And we need to be mindful to encourage people to give that chance and give that opportunity to change the trajectory of people's lives. So thank you for your work and thank you for what you do. For those that are just joining us, we are talking about diversity in Hollywood on set and on screen with an esteemed panel of nonprofit and industry insiders. In 1946, Los Angeles writer Carrie McWilliams called Hollywood an island within an island. Even though Hollywood was in Los Angeles, it was not of Los Angeles. And a question that I pose to each of you is, why is it that young people growing up within a 5 to 15 mile radius of any studio aren't first in line for jobs and entertainment? What can Hollywood do to hire our young people? And Martin, we'll start with you.
Well, I think one of the things is representation, right? Because if you don't see yourself in these positions, then you don't know that that's a pathway that you can take. I'm thinking about the kids that are living within 5 miles of the studios, and most likely they're going to be a black or brown kid, right? And imagine driving by these sets on the streets and not seeing yourself on that set. You know, I think inherently as underserved communities already feel like the world isn't built for them. So I'm just imagining what that kid feels when he sees you know, like I said, when he sees those sets driving down the streets. And I always wonder to myself, how can we make it more equitable? What needs to change? And I think one of the things that needs to change is access and understanding that these kids need mentors. And when you don't have a mentor and you don't have someone advocating for you, it's very easy for you to fall through the cracks. And so that, I think, is something that the industry needs to kind of work on for sure. And it needs to come from up top. It needs to come from the individuals that are making the hiring decisions. And when we do get, say, a showrunner of color who makes it, essentially, they have to be able to give back to. They have to understand how giving back to their community is going to benefit the storytelling process as a whole and benefit getting, you know, kids of color these jobs, because there's so many kids that, you know, if our industry was just silo in itself and it was just, you know, it wasn't involved with paying pension and it wasn't involved with the livelihood of millions of people and it wasn't diverse, you know, is that as problematic? I don't know. But here you have kids who are going to school and going into debt for something like their career, for something that they aspire to do. And when there's no access for them, it's just such a waste. It's a waste of potential, and it's a waste of skills. And like I said, it's hard to see underserved communities not really get to fulfill their true potential because of these barriers.
Right. And thank you for that. And when you talk about showrunners, I'm thinking of Prentice Penny on the Insecure show, and of course Issa Rae, that made sure there were so many opportunities for so many people. So showrunners and people that get their foot in the door and leave the door open are real difference makers. So thank you for bringing that point. Sumi, let's have you answer the same question about, you know, how we can help young people within the 5 mile radius get into the industry.
Yeah, so I think Martin answered it beautifully by saying access is number one. I think another issue, and for Group Effort Initiative in particular, we focus on 3 pathways. We have corporate jobs, creative, and production. And for our corporate pathway particularly, most companies require a 4-year degree. And for us, that has been a pretty big barrier. And actually, this panel times up perfectly because there was a whole article this morning in LA Times about community college and more people having to go to community college here because they can't afford a 4-year college, even with Pell Grants and loans, et cetera. So I think for GEI specifically, in terms of the corporate pathway, for all of those folks, I've grown up in Hollywood, a lot of them can't afford a four-year college. They might have gotten into one, they might have the brains for it, but they can't afford it even with grants or even with loans. And so it would be great if companies could open up their doors a little bit more, and as opposed to requiring a four-year, why not try a two-year? Bring those people in, see how they do. They're just as passionate, they're just as smart, and we live in a city with such wonderful community colleges, and I don't think we're utilizing those people as much as we could. So that for us, at least on the corporate side, has been a huge barrier. And we're doing it. We're finally have gotten to the point where we've had so much success with all of our participants. Companies have loosened their strings a little bit. And a lot of the major studios in Hollywood are starting to let in 2 years for internships. And we've gotten a few of those folks hired full time. But it's been a slow roll on trying to overcome that particular barrier.
Good. Thank you so much for that. And we're dealing with it in government as well. Yep. I actually would like to be intentional, Chip, to ask you the same question.
I'm doing some work in Compton now and talking to young people in a middle school down there and talking to people that grew up there. And there's a lot of communities in LA that aren't represented in Hollywood. And there's so many people in the business that never reach out into these communities either and let people know that they are welcome in the entertainment industry. Like, I've talked to so many people that have come through Manifest Works, and I hear it in the interview stage, and they thought, I just thought that was someone else's world. You know, I thought, you know, that's not open to me. And it's just a matter of finding that. I mean, and it's still a very tough industry to get into because there's such an allure about working in Hollywood, even on set. And so I think one of the things, too, is, this might sound crazy, but say no to your nephew. Say, go find a job from someone you don't know. You know, you have a leg up already. You don't need me. I'm saving that job for someone who that opportunity is much more meaningful. And so we get people that come to Manifest Works and they tick all the boxes, but they're already getting their own jobs and they're already starting to grind, and we say, we love you and we love what you're doing, but do you really need us? We need to save these seats for the people that have everything, but they haven't developed that network and they haven't developed those soft skills to get on set. And so I think a big part of it is being very deliberate and hire deliberately and go out and maximize your talent from people whose lives you know you're going to change. Because it's awesome to look and see everybody on set, like seeing it run like a top. But it's also really great to know that those three people right there that are grips, you saw them start as PAs and they just bought their first car or they just bought their first house, and you know that your hiring decision as a supervisor was a part of that, changing that person's life. And those are the kinds of things that it's happening all the time, and it's available to people. They just got to kind of open their eyes and get involved. You know, reach out to the organizations that are already working with these populations. You know, some of these organizations, but they're all over town, you know, and I think if people just understood and went and paid them a visit, came to a class, you know, and observed Manifest Works in action or other workshops that are hosted by other organizations, and you see like, holy crap, this population isn't just, it's not a charity hire, these are amazing people.
That's the point, and that's why Hollywood's losing money, because they're missing out on the amazing talent that is literally blocks away from their doors. So thank you so much for that answer. I'm going to go to Sumi. And your organization, a group effort initiative, was created by Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, and we're seeing more interest in expanding diversity from, you know, top Hollywood names. Can you, you know, just tell us a little bit about your organization and how things are working there?
Yeah, so yes, Group Effort Initiative was founded in August 2020 by Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. And our mission is to help underserved populations have long-lasting careers in the entertainment industry. And we do that. And again, underrepresented is a very broad term because we work with all sorts of populations and all sorts of organizations across the country and in LA specifically. So we work with people of color, LGBTQ+, people with disability, former foster and homeless youth, and we actually have a partnership with you guys to help some previously incarcerated folks also make their way into the industry as well. And so what we do is we provide all sorts of educational training, professional development, PA training, entertainment-specific training. We have a pretty large roster of job placement opportunities, entry-level jobs, corporate creative, and physical production pathways. And we work with over 250 companies across North America. We work in LA. We're also working in 15 other cities in North America. And we also provide mentorship. You know, piggybacking off of what you said, Martin, we found mentorship to be very, very important and have folks actually volunteer their time from the industry. So we started a mentorship program last year, or about halfway through that program. And yes, we do have two celebrities that are backing up group effort initiative. And I think we've seen that a lot in the industry. You mentioned Issa Rae. She has done a lot. She has her own office in South Central off Crenshaw. She's done a lot of work with our folks and hired a lot of folks for internships within her own office. Ava DuVernay has her 501c3 array in Filipino Town, and has doing a lot to lift diverse filmmakers up, as well as housing a massive database with a bunch of below-the-line crew that can help out on productions. And then you have someone like Riz Ahmed, who's really lifting up Muslim voices and, you know, teaching people that being part of the Islam religion is not bad. Like, these are the wonderful stories. These are the wonderful people. But the one thing I will say about all of those people, they're all from the communities they're representing. And while I think, obviously, it's very important for Issa Rae and Ava DuVernay and Riz Ahmed and all the other wonderful underrepresented voices giving back to their community, it's also important for straight white men to do the same thing. They've had it easy. They haven't faced as many barriers. And someone like Ryan Reynolds, I think, you know, I'm not going to pat him on the back and say he's done everything he's needed to do, but the fact that he actually came out and created this organization and is funding it, and is allowing us to kind of thrive and grow in the way we need to as a straight white man, he recognizes that I did not face these hardships, did not overcome these barriers that a lot of my colleagues have, and I want to help and be an ally towards that. So I hope that down the road, you know, obviously Ava and Issa and all those people continue doing their great work, but we need more straight white men to pick it up and serve as allies and start funding these big initiatives too.
I really appreciate that. And my father was in the industry, worked at Paramount Universal in HVAC, doing air conditioning. But in the 70s, when he was trying to get in, his application found its way to the round file. I remember as a child, it was the first time I heard that, and they said, you got to join the union. But then the union, with Local 40, IBW wasn't letting, you know, certain people in regularly. And so having an ally is how he really got into the industry. And again, it's life-changing, it's a game-changing. And he was a vet, you know, that did HVAC work in the military, but, you know, breaking into Hollywood, even as skilled as he was, it was problematic. So this is something that is important and needed, and we need to encourage more people to become allies. Yes. So thank you for that. So Martin, the next question for you is, when you mentor young people and try to get them into the industry, what guidance do you give them?
I was most recently a program director and head of production for a nonprofit, so I had the opportunity to work with a lot of underserved youth, particularly from the foster care community as well. And I tell them three things. The first thing is to be polite. You never know who you're talking to, and you never know which person is going to get you that next job. When I was in San Diego, I was kind of a big fish in a small pond, so all of the jobs that I got were from my own accord. Got to Los Angeles, completely different story. And for the first time, a relationship I had in San Diego, that person got me a job 7 years later here in Los Angeles. And I just imagined myself, what if I was a jerk to that person? What if I had a bad day? And like, you can't necessarily, as a person of color, sometimes you can have bad days, unfortunately, and it's unfair. But being polite is something that you really have to take into consideration. The next one is to be on time. I think everyone knows to be on time, right? As a person of color, unfortunately, you don't have a lot of opportunities to have someone change their mind about who you are. There's a lot of unconscious biases in our industry as well. So if you're on time, that's the minimal that you can do to leave a good impression. And then the last thing I say is you really can't say no. As someone that came from an underserved community in San Diego, Los Angeles just seems so far away, and trying to pursue my dreams just felt so far-fetched, especially knowing nobody in the industry, right? So I told myself back in 2006 when I was in San Diego, the television industry died up there, and then we had the writer's strike, and so I was doing everything in entertainment that I could in San Diego. And I didn't say no, and I gained a lot of individuals, I gained a lot of contacts, right? And so if you don't say no, especially when you're starting out, you are going to put yourself in a position to meet more people, to gain more skills, and to build that resume and get you to the point where you finally can say no, right? You maybe not have to take that PA job because you've been a coordinator for so long. You've done the legwork to get where you're at now, and then you can finally say no. But when you're first starting out, it's probably a good idea to take as many jobs as you possibly can in the entertainment industry to really boost that resume, because that's what, at the end of the day, people are going to be looking at your resume, and people are going to be looking at you as the person to see if you have the attributes needed to be successful.
And what do you tell executives about your mentees?
If I can rephrase my answer a little bit, and to not what I tell them, but what I would tell them would be that there are a lot of youth and there are a lot of individuals that don't get the opportunities to shine. Like you were saying earlier about these really go-getters that have faced adversity, and if they can take the time to understand what ACE scores are and understand what adverse childhood experiences are, and they can really empathize with some of the trauma that these youth are going through, it would make them really want to help them, right? Because we're in Hollywood, we love an underdog story. We love seeing somebody go from rags to riches. As an executive, you have the opportunity to turn that and turn it from something fictional into something that's tangible, and to allow these kids and allow these young people to build themselves up, to make something of themselves. And if they understood trauma and companies and studios were trauma informed, I think that would be a huge step in really helping underserved communities.
Wow, I really appreciate that answer. Sumi, let's talk about the targeted local hires. I mean, you worked for the city of Los Angeles for many years, and you were a part of a program to hire young Angelenos into city jobs. Could something similar, or does something similar exist in Hollywood?
Yeah, so I mean, yes, it would be amazing if Hollywood could create their own targeted local hire program. And while that doesn't exist, I do think there are some programs that mimic it that could either be, I think a better job of outreach could be done to let companies know, or we could even expand and tweak those programs a little bit. So one program is City of LA, through their Economic Workforce Development Department, they have a subsidized youth employment program. And GEI has been a partner on that program for years. And what that program does, and a lot of companies don't know about it, is the city will come in using funding that they have and actually subsidize part-time and internship opportunities for companies, for nonprofit organizations that deal with the entertainment, et cetera, and actually pay for that when they can't pay it for themselves. And so GEI, we work with, like I said before, we work with over 250 companies. Some of those are small startup entertainment companies that just don't have the budget yet for paid internships. All of our folks have to have paid opportunities. Most of them are low income. We're not going to do this unpaid internship situation. And so what the city will do is we find the companies, they kind of serve as a work site, and then the city serves as both the payroll administrator. They kind of take on the liability for those folks that they're hiring, and they're literally your HR department for these jobs. And so we've been able to go, I think, on a seasonal basis, because we work with EWDD on summer, spring, and fall, and we hire about 50 to 75 people per season just from that allotment of money itself, in addition to all the other company partners that we work with that already pay our people. But we're able to give people entry-level positions to start out, and then a lot of times as we give those positions, the companies realize these people are great, and they actually end up hiring them full-time afterwards. We've had tons of success with that program, and those people are all City of LA residents. They all have to be 18 to 24, and then there's a few other requirements you have to fulfill, low income, et cetera. But that's a really great program that if more companies in Hollywood take advantage of that, they could really strengthen their pipeline without having to pay up front. And then down the road, hopefully they can actually build out and pay those people and hire them full time after. So that's one really great program. Another one, like I mentioned earlier, I think the California Film Tax Credit incentive is somewhat of a targeted local hire program. Obviously, it still needs to be tweaked a bit, I think, to allow for more diversity. But the whole point of that is to incentivize people to keep their productions in California. And obviously, a lot of that production happens in the LA region. So to keep that production in LA. So I think while targeted local hire, it would be amazing if we had an actual program for that. We do have some other great programs that mimic it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And my next question is to Chip. We've talked a lot about why Hollywood should be more inclusive and why people should pursue careers in the industry. What can they do to become more qualified for studio positions?
Well, the interesting thing about entertainment, and I think why it's so attractive, I mean, it has all the, the glitter that attracts people to it. But the entertainment industry is an incredibly vast industry. I mean, and it covers everything from, from production to health and wellness, to executive jobs, to office jobs, to all these different things. So I think one of the most important things is understanding that this industry in particular rises and falls by relationships and personal networks. And that's a difficult thing to start with. As you mentioned, you can come and be the most qualified person in the world, but if you don't know a soul, where do you start? And so, like at Manifest Works, we start on day one, putting people in a lot of different environments and tell them, take advantage of that. Go introduce yourself to people, get their business cards, say that you're an emerging professional. So I think one of the most important things is networking. Find out where production people, how they mingle, and it might start online, but you will find ways to get to know these communities and become a part of them. How you prepare professionally really depends. Like you were saying, there's some tracks where you do need a degree, and there's others where you just need to know sort of set lingo and the rules of the game. And, being on time, good footwear, being ready to work 14 hours, go home and sleep 4 hours to get back to set on time, understanding the rigors of production and those sorts of things. That's essential. I mean, just really the basics. You can go on YouTube and learn all these things, but you can't go on YouTube and build your network. But it's all at your fingertips. It's amazing. We tell people, like, go on LinkedIn. You want to work for a small independent production company because you love those kinds of films? Go on LinkedIn, find those executives, write to them, tell them your story briefly, but just say, I'm a PA and I've got a little bit of experience and would love to get more working on the types of things you do. The internet is an amazing connector. It's an amazing tool for learning, for networking, and all those things. And it just takes, I think, everybody who started as a PA and ascended through the ranks in Hollywood can look back on their career and point to one or two people that were a true champion or someone that really got them across the hump and up to the next level. And so it's just a matter of getting out there and meeting people, and you will find your one person. I've seen it happen time and time again. People in Hollywood, the executives, the studio heads, they want to, make a difference in people's lives. It's the most gratifying thing in the world, and they don't realize the power they have sometimes. They live and work. They're so busy that they live and work in this bubble and don't have the time to step outside of it. But you do that once or twice a year, and you get out and you meet people from these communities, and then you take that back to your bubble and you go say, you know what, folks? This is kind of important. I went to this graduation the other day. I met some amazing people. Martin, I want you to start looking into this, and just plant those seeds. It's so important.
Thank you so much for that answer. And it's important just to get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
Any position. And when people see your hustle, more opportunities come. So I have a question for all of you. What advice would you give to someone seeking a career in Hollywood? And what advice would you give a studio looking to become more diverse?
I think the decision makers are so far removed from everyday life. Like you were saying, they're so caught up with the financials and making sure this engine of television or film just continues to run. There are resources. I remember early in the years of the Directors Guild, we did have a list of diverse men and women that we could send to studios. One of the things was we just don't know who to hire, right? And that was an excuse that was always used. I'm like, we have a list for you that we can send
binders?
you. Binders full of
People.
Yes, exactly. And so I just try to find creative ways to seek support. Go talk to nonprofit organizations, like you were saying earlier. There's so many people around that care about this issue. You can throw a penny out and reach someone who really cares about diversity. So, make it more accessible for us to get to you, for the nonprofits to get to you, I would say too, so that we can have those meetings with you and tell you all about who these diverse individuals are and how you can diversify your slate of shows or whatever it might be. So we're willing to listen. Just give us the opportunity to talk.
Quick answer, Sumi.
Yeah, I would say in addition to looking and joining some of these nonprofit organizations that we all talked about today, as much as I know my participants hate to hear this, informational interviews, they have worked. So go on LinkedIn and try to go find, the dream studio or the dream company that you want to work at, and find a few folks, reach out to them on LinkedIn and set up an informational session. Yes, I know people don't like to do that, and it's all about, they're like, oh, I have to network, I have so much other things to do, but we've had, I would say maybe about 20 or 30 of our participants over the years that have gotten jobs from those informational interviews, to really just reach out, because the thing is, diversity, it is at the forefront of everyone's mind in Hollywood. It has been for a while. And so if you reach out to them, they are looking to help. And like you said, they're in their bubble. But if you actually make that effort and reach out to them, chances are they're going to come back and be like, let's grab coffee, let's do a Zoom. So that would be my number one piece of advice. And then in terms of what studios could do more, I think exactly how Chip said it, go out into the community more. If you're a studio in Hollywood, go, within the 5-mile radius and go look into those communities, go work with those community-based organizations, all the CBOs in that area, figure out who lives around you and how you can help them get in the door.
That's great. And if you need to find organizations that you can work with, you can always go to @LA Civil Rights. And
Yes.
we will definitely help you.
Yes.
You can put in Los Angeles for everyone and a URL, and you'll get us.
I'm going to push that message out
Yes,
too.
yes.
For young folks, I think, if there's something about production you love and you get really good at it, then also understand your power in this moment in time. People are looking for you. People are looking for talented, hardworking people. And if you help them check their diversity box, great, but really understand that, if you do come and you do master your craft and you invest in your craft, people are going to be looking for you, and that's important. And I think for the people who are hiring, it's like anything else. A diverse team is a stronger team. A diverse set is a stronger set. You're going to have a diverser set of lived experiences, of problem-solving abilities, of interpersonal skills, and of insights. So don't do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it because everybody wants to have the strongest team possible, the most functional set possible, and the most creative writer's room possible. It's like, why limit yourself?
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you for this answer. But one thing I want to say is, once people get to these positions, we need to be as intentional as we were to hire folks, to make them feel welcomed and celebrated. And so still taking folks out for coffee and still giving people a pat on the back and letting people know, I'm happy that you're here. When you see the only person in the room, maybe that may be from an underrepresented community. So thank you all for your input on how to get people in, and I know we could talk forever about how to move forward afterwards, but Sumi, Chip, and Martin, just thank you for joining us today. And I also would like to thank Arthur Fishel, who helped produce this event, and the entire team here at Channel 35 for making it happen. I am Capri Maddox of the LA Civil Rights Department, asking you to keep the faith and keep the fight. Thank you.